Hi everybody, and welcome back to Beyond Bones, the dedicated channel for vegan ramen. Today, as promised in my first video, we are going to make some vegan chashu, aka plant-based pork belly. This is a recipe that I adapted from a lot of different sources, especially from the channels Vegan Life Soy Sauce and Sauce Stash, which I will both link in the description box below. This is an incredible topping for every kind of bowl of ramen. So, let's begin. Okay, first we gotta do some preparations. We put 200 grams of dried white beans in a pot, cover them with water and boil them until they're soft. While the beans boil, we prepare the braising liquid. So in a tall container, we combine 250 milliliters of water with 125 milliliters of soy sauce, 125 milliliters of mirin, and 60 milliliters of sake. We're also adding 1 tablespoon of brown sugar and 2 peeled and smashed cloves of garlic. Then we give it a good stir to dissolve the sugar, and then we set it aside for later. Once the beans are soft, and that really depends on your beans, we drain them and we put them in a food processor. You notice a lot of steam here. That's because I put the beans in straight from boiling, which is when they are most mashable. We might need to pause and scrape down the sides once or twice here to get all the beans mashed up. Even though we're not going for a completely smooth puree, it's okay if there are some bean chunks left inside. This is about the consistency that we want. Alright, on to the quote-unquote meat part. We start with 300 grams of our bean puree, to which we add 200 grams of wheat gluten, 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast, 2 tablespoons of garlic powder, 1 tablespoon of onion powder, and 1 teaspoon of good old MSG. Next, we combine the wet ingredients, which are 3 tablespoons of our veggie stock, 3 tablespoons of refined coconut oil, 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, and a tablespoon of yeast extract like Marmite. This is a real pain to get in there, but believe me, it really amps up the flavor. Next, we add 1 tablespoon of liquid smoke, 1 tablespoon of tomato paste, and finally 3 tablespoons of pureed red beet. This is what's going to give our mixture that red meaty color, so don't skip this. Once all the ingredients are in, we give it a quick mix to combine. In a stand mixer, we then mix together the dry ingredients. You could totally do this by hand. I just happen to have a stand mixer, and I'm also quite lazy. The residual moisture from the beans is going to help with mixing everything together. But of course we need the wet ingredients to make a cohesive dough ball. After some time you might want to switch to the dough hook for kneading, and at this point we also need to check the consistency. My mixture was too wet, so I added 2 more tablespoons of wheat gluten, but depending on your beans you might just be fine without the adjustments. So after some more kneading, a firm mass should start to form, which we then take out of the mixing bowl and start stretching on our work surface. Really use your knuckles here, as you want those gluten strands to develop for that meaty texture. After a good massage, the meat should be nice and springy, so we roll it up into a ball, give it a nice slap, and set it aside. Okay, next up, the fat part. Very similar to before, we start with our bean mixture. We then add the wheat gluten and nutritional yeast, as well as some salt. For the wet ingredients, we keep it a lot simpler and just combine equal parts refined coconut oil and oat milk. As this is going to act as the fatty part of the pork belly, naturally the relative amount of oil is a lot higher here. We mix as best we can and then move on to the stand mixer. Here, same thing as before. First let it run with just the dry ingredients for a minute, and then we add the wet ingredients all at once. We also add about 2 tablespoons of water to make the dough a little more pliable than the meat part. After about 5 minutes, we're left with this soft and smooth ball of dough, which we give a good massage and then divide into 2 roughly equal parts. Finally, it's time to play with our meats. We take out the meat dough and divide it into 2 pieces. The bigger one should be about 2/3, the smaller one about 1/3 of the dough. Then we start rolling it out. This thing is going to fight you every step of the way. It's all the gluten that has developed through mixing and resting. So we try our best to get it into a rectangular shape of roughly a centimeter of thickness. The same thing we do with all the other parts. It really doesn't matter here if you can't get it into a perfect rectangular shape or uniform thickness. Pork bellies ain't symmetrical, and so our plant-based version doesn't have to be either. After all the rolling out, we end up with 2 slabs of meat and 2 slabs of fat. These we're going to layer one by one, starting with the biggest meat slab on the bottom. We sprinkle a little more gluten between each one of the layers to promote adhesion during the steaming. The final fat layer on top, we try to stretch out a little so it covers the entire thing. Now for the rolling. We simply fold the layers over on themselves like shown here, and then we tuck in all the little bits that might be sticking out. Once completely tucked, we take a piece of cling film and wrap up the log tightly. To be safe, you can use 2 more layers of film here, one on the left and one on the right side. Finally, we take 2 pieces of aluminum foil and wrap our log once more. We then twist and tuck in the ends, and then it's off to the steamer. We take out our biggest pot and our biggest steaming basket, get a rolling boil going, and place our log in the steamer for an hour and a half. After that time, we take it off the heat and let it cool down for at least 2 hours, but ideally in the fridge overnight, so it can firm up. Then we unwrap all the foil and all the cling film and prepare for the final step. I know right now the chashu doesn't look very appetizing, but we're not done yet. As now comes arguably the most important part, the braising. If you want to be extra, you can take some butcher's twine and wrap up the log here for that authentic rolled pork belly look. It's not necessary, but definitely gives it a nice touch. I'm going to leave a link to a video in the description box below where someone else does a way better job of showing you how to tie these knots. Once the chashu is tied up, we take out our biggest braising pan and get it ripping hot without any oil. Then we drop in our chashu and let it char for 3 to 4 minutes undisturbed on one side. Then we rotate and repeat until we're satisfied with the amount of color the outside has gotten. We then turn down the heat for a while and then pour in the braising liquid we made earlier. We also drop in 30 grams of ginger, which I forgot at the beginning of the video. Once boiling, we cover the pan and put it into the oven for 30 minutes at 180 degrees Celsius, rotating it once after this time and then letting it go for another 30 minutes. After taking it out of the oven and letting it cool down, we take the biggest Ziploc bag we can find and place our chashu inside. We then fill up our sink with water to about 2/3 and place the Ziploc bag in the water. Depending on the weight of your braising pan and of course your upper body strength, the next part might be a bit tricky. We want to transfer all that braising liquid into the Ziploc bag so the chashu can rest in it. If you want, you can take out the garlic and ginger at this point. Once the chashu and the braising liquid are safely inside, we use the water bath to push out all the air out of the Ziploc bag, carefully rolling it up and then closing the zip just above the water level. Our chashu is now nicely packed, airtight, and ready for its rest in the fridge. We are almost done here, I promise. When we are ready to have our next bowl of ramen, we take the chashu out of the fridge and place it on a cutting board. We take a really sharp or serrated knife and cut the pieces about 1 centimeter thick. Just have a look at how juicy this thing is. Next, we place the pieces on a wire rack, generously brush on some additional braising liquid, and then we take out our blowtorch and absolutely go to town on these bad boys. All the fat from the chashu and the sugar from the braising liquid are going to make for an excellent crispy crust, while the inside stays deliciously juicy. And there you have it, vegan chashu made from scratch. Of course, you can also simply fry these up in a pan. I guarantee you, these plant-based pork bellies really hold their own against the meat version. They are succulent, hearty and packed with umami, making them the perfect topping for all kinds of ramen bowls. Thank you for watching and see you next time when we are making shoyu lime ramen.